Hello there, it's behind the scenes video time, and having discussion on the Discord yesterday about frame rate analysis. So I'm about to start work on the Resident Evil Village demo. I thought that'd be a good chance to talk about some of the techniques we use in producing frame rate videos and how it's changed over the years. So I'm about to start work actually, so I'm just going to load up Adobe Premiere and we shall begin. So originally frame rate analysis, it was about recording lossless video using a lossless codec called UT codec. Fine for 720p, fine for 1080p, but things started to get a bit crazy at 4K. So yeah, we would capture the footage, we would then run it through our FPS analysis tool, FPS GUI, that would produce the traditional graphs as you know them. And then that video in FPS GUI would be exported. Now, that was fine, but a bit long-winded. It just took too long to get results. And this whole idea of having to capture in a mathematically lossless codec, what can I say? It just produced gigantic files. And when we moved to 4K using UT codec, even with 420, file transfers, file writes would be anything between 100 to 300 megabytes per second. We've got it now to the point where using compression, we can actually do it at about 1 to 1.2 gigabytes per minute. So this is like a pretty big deal. But let's look at the desktop here and see what we're doing. So actually I might as well take it into FPS GUI to begin with. I actually prepared, part of the problem was that you would need to capture, then you would need to extract the footage from those captures. You need to line it up precisely, and that's kind of what I did for demonstration purposes, looking at this Resident Evil demo here. So we're going to start, I think, with we'll do Series X versus Series X. So we just drag and drop the video. We're on 4K single format at the moment, which isn't what we want, so it produces a bit of a weird result here because it thinks we're just looking at one video. I'm not going to go too crazy on choosing the right analysis here, but this profile looks as though it'll do the trick. Can't actually see much going on. Let's try and find a bit. The end was a bit more interesting. So it's actually recording some false positive tearing there. We'll talk about that in a bit. But yeah, you can see that actually the frame rates aren't as actually loaded in the data. Initially we would have to use FPS GUI here to process these gigantic files. Don't need to do that anymore. It's all done on capture. So that the big revelation for us was taking the analysis as we capture. We analyze the data as it comes through the capture card, and then we compress it, and then that's how we can basically make these big space savings. So yeah, we're just going to pop into here and import the relevant footage and the relevant caches. This should now give you a much better idea. Yeah, so this is how we used to do it. Basically FPS GUI would import these clips, and then it would do the analysis, and then we would go to File, Export, and even if we only used say 2 seconds from this 12,000 frame analysis, then we would still have to export that file, and it was gigantic and it took ages and it really slowed us down. So let's go back into Adobe Premiere. This is the same clip. Actually, I'm going to make that screen bigger. That same clip. This is actually, that was actually the PlayStation 5 version, a bit of a preview there. So this is the Series X versus Series S here. And you can see here, S on the left there, X on the right. This is the ray tracing mode. There are big performance problems here. Now, this is fine, but the problem is that we're still having to cut out bits of our captures and line them up. This is quite a time-intensive way of doing things. It's not great. In terms of those false positives that you saw in the FPS GUI, let's just take a look at how this timeline is composed here. So we've got, let's turn off that's the analysis layer. These are the two footage layers. Actually, if I move to a more striking area, you can see how it works. So yeah, basically, This is normal footage. These are the raw captures, which are then being cropped and composited. And then we've got this layer here, which is a filter. You can see that on the left here. And there we actually import the template that we want to use. Those are the same templates that you saw in the top right there on FPS GUI. And then we have the actual analysis data, the cache data here. And I've just imported that there and then, so you can see S and X. I did look at Resident Evil Village. The false positives for tearing there, they're definitely not real. You have to check that by eye. And so we've got basically an assume vsync button there. We know it's a vsync game. I check that by eye, and we just tick that, and that makes all of those false positive tears go away. It just tells the algorithm, don't worry about tearing for this one, just count individual frames. So yeah, that's basically a way of combining old with new. We capture the footage, we cut it out, we composite it, and then we add the layer, and then we can add the platform logos a bit later. I did the same with PS5 versus Series X here, with another clip. So that's Series X on the right there, Series S, sorry, PS5 on the left there, and it's pretty much the same. Difference being when you get to the end here, it's a slight drop, there we go. When you look outside, you can see there that the Series X is slightly faster. I mean, nothing in it really. Very similar results to what we saw with Devil May Cry 5 Special Edition under ray tracing actually. So that's all well and good, but what if we want to get our frame rate analysis videos and more without having to line up and individually cut out the footage, which increases the data footprint? What if we could just bring in the raw captures and then line up raw captures using Premiere? And that's kind of what I've been experimenting with and actually used quite a lot on videos like Ratchet & Clank and God of War. What we're going to do is we're going to make a new timeline, and we're going to stick in our Series X raw captures. They're lurking here. We're going to do the ray tracing ones since they're more interesting. In fact, I'm going to stick with the first footage there, which is the village. So it's asking me if I want to change the sequence settings, which I do. So this is the raw capture that I did for the Series X version of the Resident Evil Village demo. Now we're going to bring in just a transparent overlay, which is basically just this, just frame time and frame rate. That's it. And then we're going to add the filter to that. FPS detect graph. Going to choose a template, and that's in my C Digital Foundry folder. It's all in XML format. So yeah, 4K head-to-head pass 1, that's what we want. Then we want to import the cache, the FPS data. This is generated on the fly as we capture, and it's for the whole clip. So let's go to the Resi demo folder. Series X, and it's Resi X1. Now you can see everything is fine. It's got those false positives in there again, so we're going to pop in there. Actually, I'm not going to go there, we're just going to tick that vsync box, and now all of the tearing that was erroneously being rendered there has gone. And that clip we saw at the end, which was just this cutscene here, that was actually cut out from this little area here. There it is. So we're doing a head-to-head frame rate video here, but we don't want to make the cuts. This is the first part of that procedure. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to turn off the video. So all we've got is this transparent layer with the FPS data. Okay, next sequence. This one will be PS5. Let's go to our PS5 folder. And drag and drop change the sequence settings. Can save a bit of time actually by going back to the other sequence and just copying this layer, bringing it over to PS5, moving it over there. Now obviously this is still using the wrong template, the wrong color, which was wrong anyway, but I can change that later. The wrong template and the wrong FPS data, so we just go in there and change that. So we've got head-to-head pass 1, got pass 2 here, and we want to have the correct frame rate data, so we're going to take that from the PlayStation 5. Now you'll see here that this is quite a different outlook. You can see that the frame rate counter is elsewhere. You can see that the graphs are basically, well, the grid has gone, but the graph readings are there. So now we're going to turn that off. So this is the second transparent overlay that we've got. And if we go back to sequence 1, which was Series X, that's the first. I'm actually going to change the colors here. Is that incorrect? We can just override the template there, and we want green for that first one. So we're going to change the graph line, consistency graph, oops, and the FPS number. So now we've got the right thing for Series X there. Go on to PS5. I usually use cyan there, but we'll leave that as it is for the time being. So now we've got those two transparent overlays. What are we going to do with them? We're going to make a third sequence. Do we call this head-to-head? Right, first of all, we're going to bring in the Series X footage again. I'm going to make sure it's the right one by swiping it from that sequence. We're going to bring in the PS5 video. I'm going to bring that in there. They're not synchronized at all at the moment, and that's absolutely fine. Right, and then we're going to make the composite. So we're going to have Series X on the left. So what we need to do is crop that, bring in a crop, and we're going to crop the right 25%. We're going to shunt it to the left. Sequence here is incorrect. I'm going to change that to what it should be, which is 4K. Right. PS5 on the right, we're going to crop again. Actually, no, we don't need to. We can just move Series X up, and we can move that up. So it's 2880. So now we've got our basic composites, not in any way synchronized. Now we're going to bring in those sequences that we made. So it was sequence 1 to begin with, which was for Series X. I'm going to just cut out the audio data there. And I'm going to combine that, link it with the footage. So now, when I make a cut on the Series X footage, it makes a cut on the FPS footage as well. It's synchronized. Let's do the same for the PS5 footage. There we go. We're going to unlink first of all, then we're going to link it all together. So now what we've got are two independently set up frame rate grids, and now we can move stuff about at will using the entirety of the capture. So this is actually the ability to cut and move stuff about at will without having to individually line up and remove those original the cuts from the original capture. So let's find a synchronization point to begin with, a cutscene. Series X is on the left, so you can actually see here, interesting, before gameplay actually starts, frame rate doesn't really mean anything, it's just black screens. But you can see here that we are broadly synchronized. So I'm going to synchronize, if we look on the PlayStation 5 on the right there, oops, what's going on there? Right, if we look at PlayStation 5 on the right there, when we look up, that tree hits the top, see that? That's going to be my synchronization point on PlayStation 5, so I'm going to cut there. Then we're going to find the same point, it's pretty close actually, on Series X. Let's zoom in a little bit. Then we can shunt that back, delete all of that, then pull it back. And there we go. Now we've actually synchronized the feeds. I'd actually probably start the video here so we don't have this legacy data of the loading screen, which would probably confuse people. So you can see here actually that we've got right at the very beginning a drop from 60 frames per second on both Series X and PlayStation 5, which actually no, it's just PlayStation 5 by the look of it on this scene here. This is with ray tracing on. With ray tracing off, both of them are locked 60. And there's a drop on both systems. So you can see that similar to this clip that I did earlier, there it is. It's a similar sort of delta between the two systems there, but the difference is that on here I had to go into the original capture, cut it out, duplicate the data. A bit of a pain in the ass, to be honest. But here, using this technique of compositing footage and transparent performance layers, I can produce head-to-heads without making any cuts, and I can do so throughout the entire clip. So basically all you need to do here is just, I mean, it kind of goes out of sync here. If I'd actually done the original captures a bit more synchronized, then that wouldn't have been a problem. But this village demo really is just a series of interlinked cutscenes really. So if I stop there, that's kind of like where we lose sync, and then we move to the next cutscene. Where's that going to be? It's going to be, I guess, when we meet that lady in the hut. So if I go there, it's going to take a little while. There we go. There she is. So we need to find a synchronization point for this cutscene. Although I suspect the end result is going to look rather dull. This is actually quite a good situation for subtitles. They usually crop up at the same point. They provide good synchronization points. So I'm going to try to synchronize when we stop there. Okay, so that's on PS5 on the right. Now let's try and find the same point on Series X. There's that cutscene. So we're looking at the left of the screen here. Right, there's that point of that. Although it looks as though it's not synchronized. Let's see what we can do anyway. That might have been a bad steer. Yeah, you get a rough idea. It's not entirely synchronized as I'd hoped. I'd have to match up the cutscene. It's all a bit dark, which is making this quite challenging. But yeah, you can see that we're in the same sort of ballpark. Let's do one more, which is, I guess, that area that we look at here. This should be fairly easy to synchronize because it is a cutscene and I can actually see what I'm doing. So let's go back to the head-to-head. This is kind of right at the end, really. Yeah, there's that cutscene there on Series X. And there is the drop on PS5. So let's have a look and see what we're doing here. Right. Actually, it's before that. Right. PS5 side. This is a cutscene here. yeah, a good sort of synchronization point there, I guess, when that beam starts to come into view. So we're going to cut on PS5 there. Series X, we haven't reached that point yet. It's a bit further on. There's the beam. That should hopefully be the same point. Delete what's before it. Expand out the clip. Yep, and we've got a pretty good match there. Not quite perfect, but good enough. And you can see that we've replicated that same performance comparison that we did by manually cutting out the clips there, which was a bit of a pain. Okay, so you might be wondering why the FPS data needs to be in a separate sequence, why we can't just stick it onto the main timeline. That's because the frame counts in the sequence are related to the frame counts in the FPS cache. And if we make cuts, it actually resets the cache. It no longer becomes accurate. So it needs to sit within its own sequence, and then we can edit that sequence. So there are other advantages to this. We know that this is pretty much synchronized. So we've got our frame rate data here. We also need comparison clips. Obviously, what we can do here is simply unlink everything, copy the two clips, move them out, and you've got a comparison. So this process of lining up the clips to get the performance differentials, they can also be used to get like-for-like image quality comparisons. And I guess the only thing which is really missing would be the platform logos. Let's go back to our original head-to-head here. So this is Series X versus Series X. I'm going to go to my labels. It's in my stuff folder, obviously. Labels. And give those an individual layer each. And so that's Series S on the left there, Series X is on the right, just shunt that over. Typically I add a drop shadow to that because white on white you occasionally get can be a bit tricky. And yeah, that's kind of like a completed frame rate analysis video. So this has all been about a process of rationalization really. Back in the day, lossless, mathematically lossless UT codec footage, absolutely fine for 720p. A bit more of a pain at 1080p, totally unworkable at 4K. We needed a better solution. That started by using ProRes recorders, but we've gone back to capture cards now, at least I have, and this enables us to grab uncompressed data from the capture card, perform frame rate analysis on that feed before we compress the footage. So we actually get all of the analysis done before we even finish the capture. It's actually been done on the fly. We take that into Premiere. We can then do whatever we want with it. As you've seen, we've got this filter that actually does the graphing. The other advantage of this is that back in the day we were exporting entire videos of frame rate data and we might only use a few seconds of it. What we have here is basically a sequence within Premiere that we can actually just dip into. It will only actually render the bits that we need. It's like a nested sequence within the main edit. And that's kind of everything you need to know really. I mean, I guess advantages of the old system that we've got here. If you look at the filter that we've got here on the left here, we can actually have up to 4 comparison points. The actual 4 inputs there is typically used for PC, where we have the benchmark graphs. That's where all 4 generally come to the fore. But you know, we could do a 3-way comparison. We could add in Series S to the mix there if we wanted to, and it could be done in this head-to-head format if we really wanted it to, but it would be quite problematic. I think generally once you start adding too many data points to a frame rate graph, it becomes a bit impenetrable. 2 ways and 3 ways kind of work. But yeah, that's basically how we do things now, and the flexibility that we've got. We can basically produce a frame rate graph from just raw capture now and raw frame rate cache. If you want to see what the cache looks like, let's go and have a look at that. So let's look at the cache here. Series S is probably a bit more interesting because it drops more frames. Now, to begin with, it's all zeros. That means that basically it's almost like 0 frames per second, and that's because we're most likely loading. Here, if we move down, we're into gameplay here. This will be a drop frame, that will be a drop frame, this will be a unique frame. And here is how many lines a frame persists for. Because it's VSync, it's two 2160p frames. I captured the Series S version at 4K, even though it's a 1440p title. Yeah, that's what the cache looks like. If we look at Series X, that will be quite a lot more interesting, or less interesting I should say, because you can see here a bit of loading at the beginning, I guess, but it's just unique frames all the time, because it is basically just a 60 FPS game. So that's it, that's frame rate analysis as we do it in the here and now. PS4 Pro 2016, those days were pretty dark. But thankfully we've managed to come up with much more workable solutions. But I guess that's all I've really got to share at this point. I suppose I should just get on with this Resident Evil Village demo analysis. So thanks for watching, thanks for supporting Digital Foundry, and yeah, feel free to discuss any other workflow things in the Discord. Tag me on that, and maybe I'll do a behind the scenes video on it. But that's all from me for now, thanks for watching. Remember when I said that was all for me for now? I lied. Basically, I just wanted to show you some of the final project. So this is my Premiere timeline. You can see the pink blocks there, just like labels and screenshots. Green blocks are the sequences that I described earlier. And the blue blocks are just like capture, raw capture. And from here, you're just going to see some of those component sequences that I built up to basically get together like a critical mass of comparison assets and frame rate data. I'd say there's probably about an hour's worth of frame rate data in all, and I just basically pick and choose what I want to have in the final edit. But I do have all of that data available. But really, what we've discovered on Digital Foundry is that it's about presenting a narrative, and that is actually more important than just bombarding you with a lot of data, where a lot of the time it's just flat out 60 frames per second. It's about finding the points of interest and actually analyzing the data rather than just showing it. So yeah, this is the timeline. The other guys probably do things quite differently, but I just like having all of that data and all of those comparison points at my fingertips. But yeah, now this is the end of the video. Thanks for watching.